Okay, I am Marco Altobello. I am a member, a friend of the Freedom for Italy network, and I will talk today about the story and the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen, the first African American pilots in the history of the United States of America. And I usually start when I spoke about these brave pilots, talking about their famed mission to Berlin. On March 24, 1945, at the Ramitelli Air Base in Italy, pilots from America's first all-black fighter group took part in a mission that went down in the history of World War II. Their mission was to escort B-17 bombers on the first leg of an attack on Berlin, and their direct orders were to protect the bombers at all costs. But over German skies, African-American pilots faced the deadliest Nazi weapon, the pride of the Führer, the German jet fighters of the Luftwaffe. And as these fighter pilots took on Nazi jets in the skies over Berlin, back home in the Freeman Army airfield, their brothers in arms were fighting another battle. At Freeman Field, 162 black officers were arrested and court-martialed because they rejected the segregation imposed by the US military. They tried to get into the officers' club reserved for white officers. So, what was happening that day? 20 years before Rosa Parks refused to leave her place to a white man, 30 years before Martin Luther King peace walks, these pilots in Freeman Field were trying to fight for their rights in a non-violent way. And this kind of protest, the non-violent protest, was the base that pushed the civil rights movement in the 60s in the United States. But not only that, back in 1945, together, the pilots of the 332nd Fighter Group in Ramitelli and the officers of the 447th Bombardment Group of Freeman Field, they were fighting two wars: against fascism, against Nazism in Europe, and against racism and segregation in their own society. So these pilots are now known as Tuskegee Airmen, or also Red Tails. Their famed mission to Berlin was the longest mission of the 15th Air Force during World War II. And this mission was a great success. For that mission and for other 1,500 missions overseas, the US Congress voted to award the Tuskegee Airmen the Congressional Gold Medal, the most important award that Congress can give to civilians. The award was presented to the surviving Tuskegee Airmen on March 29, 2007, during a ceremony in the rotunda of the US Capitol, in recognition of their unique military record, which inspired revolutionary reform in the armed forces. So today I will talk about this extraordinary story of these men and women who helped win the war and changed the American military, marking a new beginning, not only for American military, but for American society too. But to better understand this story, I think we have to go back in 1925 in the history of the United States, of the society of the United States. during the 20s and the 30s of the last century. In 1925, there was a report about the use of black manpower in wartime. This report was done by the Army War College, and there were a lot of claims that were just not true, that black people were lazy, they were shitless, dishonest, immoral, with smaller brain, not patriotic. If you put them in battle, they turn and run. And of course, they were considered incapable of doing advanced jobs, such as flying a plane. Now, American history is not only that, because we have some pioneers that proved that this report was wrong. Eugene Bullard, he flew for France during World War I, and he was one of the few black combat pilots during World War I. He was the first African-American military pilot, but as you can see, he flew for France, not for the United States of America, because black people could not fight for the United States, could not have a plane, could not fly a plane. Bessie Coleman. Bessie Coleman was the first African-American woman to hold a pilot license. She earned her license from the International Aeronautic Federation in France on June 15, 1921. So she is the earliest known black person to earn an international pilot's license. And the story of Bessie Coleman is something extraordinary. She is still an example, and she has been an example for all the generations that have followed. But it's not only about aviation, because African American in World War II had an important role. African Americans had participated in every conflict since the Revolutionary War, and more than 1 million African Americans served in the United States Armed Forces during World War II. But only the 500% of armed forces were African American men, and they always served in segregated units. Of more than 140,000 women who served during World War II, about 6,500 of them were African Americans. And from 1941 to 1946, at the Tuskegee Airmen airfield, at the Tuskegee Airmen training airbase, 992 pilots were trained during the war. So these pilots faced extraordinary privation, and they faced a very hard training in Tuskegee before the war. As you know, by 1941, the 99th Pursuit Squadron was the first squadron that graduated in Tuskegee in March 1942. And their first mission was during the Operation Corkscrew, the attack on Pantelleria, because they led an invasion in Sicily. And for this mission, they earned a distinguished unit citation. But in April 1943, the 99th Pursuit Squadron was sent in North Africa, and then when the Allied invaded Sicily in July 1943, they were sent in Italy. Now, after the 8th of September 1943, Italy found itself divided in two by the Gustav Line. The Gustav Line was a fortified defensive line prepared in Italy on Hitler's orders, and the line extended from the mouth of Garigliano River on the border between Lazio and Campania up to Ortona, near Pescara, in south of Pescara, in the region of Abruzzo. So this line divided Italy in two. In the north, the territory was in the hands of the Italian Social Republic and the Nazis, the Germans, while in the south, there were the Allies, the British, the Americans, and they were rising the peninsula after the landing in Sicily. And in this particular context, the story of the Tuskegee Airmen began to be very deeply linked to Italy. Because they were, after the invasion of Sicily, they were also employed in Italy. An important event that we have to underline in this story is the bombardments of Foggia, are the bombardments of Foggia. From May to September 1943, Foggia was bombed by the Allies, and it's something very, very tragic for this city, because there were 20,000 people, civilians, that died during the bombing of Foggia. And so in this period, after the bombing of Foggia and after the landing in Termoli, the territory of the Adriatic coast in Molise and in northern Apulia was liberated. And so the Foggia airfield complex became the key of the war in the skies, because this complex had almost 40 little airfields that were seized from the Germans. All these little airfields were in the hands of the Nazis, but in 1943 the Allies liberated this part of Italy, as I said, at terrible cost, because 20,000 civilians died in bombing, but by October 1943 all this area was liberated. And this is a map that was published on the New York Times in September 27, 1943. As you can see, yesterday, Monday 27 of September, the 8th Army of the British Army advanced impetuously for 24 miles to conquer Foggia. The attack was so sudden and fast that the Germans suffered heavy losses and failed to destroy the important airfields. President Roosevelt called the fall of Foggia one of the most important strategic victories achieved by the Allies. No part of Germany is now safe from bombing, he said. This is a part of the article that was published on the New York Times on September 27, 1943. So the Foggia airfield complex extended also in Molise, in the northern part of Apulia, and in Molise. And in the little town of Campomarino, which is the town where I live, 5 airfields were built. 3 of them, as you can see, Nuova, Canne, and Biferno, hosted the British Balkan Air Force. Now, the Balkan Air Force was a multinational unit, so it was composed of pilots of the Commonwealth, also from former Yugoslavia, Greece, Poland, United States, New Zealand, Australia. And the 2 little airfields of Madna and Ramitelli hosted the 15th Air Force. So the Tuskegee Airmen served in these 2 Air Force. And in January 1944, they were employed in the Battle of Anzio. In 2 days of vicious fighting over Anzio, the 99th Fighter Squadron racked up the most aerial victories of any other squadron, because they shot down 13 enemy aircrafts. And by June 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron had been in combat for a full year. They'd flown 500 missions from Ramitelli and Madna, downed 18 enemy planes, and lost only 4 men during combats. And that July, the 3 new African American Fighter Squadron joined the 99th Fighter Squadron in Ramitelli. So we have the 332nd Fighter Group composed of 4 fighter squadron, the 99th, the 100, the 101 Fighter Squadron, the 300 and the 301. So normally a fighter squadron was composed of a fighter group, was composed of 3 fighter squadron. But because of the segregation, because there were no other fighter groups that could be joined by black pilots, this fighter group was composed of 4 fighter squadron, and they were all based in Ramitelli, in this little segregated airfield. This is an aerial view, a photo took on 1945, and we can see all the 5 little airfields of Campomarino: Biferno, Canne, Madna, Ramitelli, and Nuova. This is a part of the runway of the Madna airfield in 2025. And as you can see, the Tuskegee Airmen were first employed in Pantelleria, Licata, Barcellona, that are in Sicily, and then in Foggia, Madna, and Capodichino, but unofficially, because they were together with white pilots. So this was an unofficial integration. But from June 1944 to October 1945, all the 4 squadrons were together in Ramitelli, and Ramitelli became the home of the Tuskegee Airmen during World War II. This is the runway of the Ramitelli airfield in 1944. And as you know, today's Italy comes with 3,000 years of history, and much of this history was seen by the Allied soldier during World War II. But if we look closely, the Italy of World War II still exists, because we have monuments, war cemeteries, museums, and places where battles took place that are still preserved and protected today. However, there is an important place in Italy, in Ramitelli, in Campomarino, that has been overlooked in Italy. In the town where I live, 200 miles east of Rome, on the Adriatic Sea, stands a building that has seen much better days. A building like the story behind it, like the story that I'm telling you today, that needs to be preserved. This is the operational center of the Ramitelli airfield, and this location, now surrounded by fields, is where the Tuskegee Airmen took off in their P-51 Red Tails fighter planes. As I said, they escorted American bombers over Europe, and thanks to their bravery and courage, they accomplished thousands of bombing missions over Europe. So this exact spot, it's not just a building, it's not just about war, but this place represents also the beginning of a movement, the fight for equality, and the winning of a war, or should I say the winning of 2 wars, against Nazism abroad and against discrimination at home. It's a great legacy, all here in this abandoned field in Italy. And when I walk these dusty streets today, to me it's like going to a shrine where a group of aviators and pioneers have become legendary in American history and also in Italy, also for Italian history. And in this airfield, in Ramitelli airfield, these pilots were not alone, because for every pilot in the air, there were 10 maintenance personnel on the ground supporting him. So all these people, men and women, are today considered Tuskegee Airmen. And their contribution to the armed forces during World War II is very important and full of meaning, also for the outcomes of the war. In these photos, you can see the Ramitelli Air Base in 1944 and the Ramitelli Air Base today in 2025. This airfield was located in a place that today is mostly used for agricultural and for wine activities. There was a single runway surrounded by farms, and this became the base of the 332nd Fighter Group of the 15th Air Force. This structure was surrounded by tents that hosted the African American pilots. And after May 15, 1945, this airfield was used also by the 523rd Air Service Group and the 949th Air Engineering Squadron. All these group and squadron were all composed by black people, because this was a segregated airfield. The airfield was closed and dismantled in October 1945. This is something curious, because the runways were built with the pieced steel planking known to the American as Marston mats. We called them grelle. These grelle were used after the war by the population for common uses, such gates or for as a support for agricultural vehicles. There are a lot of gates like this in Campomarino. We call them the gates of peace, or also the gates of memory, because they always remember us of the airfields that were here in Campomarino. You can see the PSP here in this photo, in black and white photo. So in all, almost 1,000 pilots were trained in Tuskegee from 1941 to 1946. 355 were deployed overseas. 84 lost their lives. Most of them are buried today in the Sicily Rome Cemetery in Nettuno and in the Florence American Cemetery. And 32 of them were captured as prisoners of war. You can see also in this photo the missions, the most important mission that in which these pilots were involved. And as you can see, most of this mission in the last months of the war were accomplished in Germany. So there were a very important mission, and the accomplishment of these pilots are very important for the outcomes of the war, because they flew for more than 1,500 combat missions, and they destroyed in the air 112 enemy aircraft, and they had also many awards and decoration. As I said, the distinguished unit citations, 3 distinguished unit citations, 1 Silver Star, 96 distinguished flying crosses, 14 Bronze Stars, 744 Air Medals, and 60 Purple Hearts. But the things that I want to underline, it's not only about their combat achievements, but it's about the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen, because In addition to their combat achievements, the Tuskegee Airmen played a significant role in breaking down racial barriers in military and also in the American society. After the war, they came back home as heroes, but they still faced discrimination and segregation in their daily lives. However, their bravery paved the way for the desegregation of the military and helped to inspire the civil rights movement. And their legacy still today inspires and empowers people all around the world. As you can see in this photo, the civil rights movement, the peace walk of Martin Luther King this movement started from the achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen and from the fight for the double victory, for the democracy at home and abroad, for this double war against Nazism and fascism in Europe and against the discrimination and the segregation in the United States. Now, what are we doing in Italy to preserve this legacy? What are we doing to preserve this great memory of the Tuskegee Airmen? With the World War II Foundation, I participated as an historical referent in the documentary The Tuskegee Airmen Return to Ramitelli. This documentary tells the story of the daughter of a Tuskegee Airman, Colette Holt. Colette Holt is the daughter of Tuskegee Airman Coleman Holt. And these are photos of the world premiere, which took place on February 9th, 2023 at the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And on July 16, 2023, the municipality of Campomarino unveiled a monument, a memorial dedicated to the Tuskegee Airmen in the presence of Italian and American institutions. We hosted also diplomats from American Embassy, US military officers from the air base of Aviano, and for the first time we hosted members of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. As you can see in this photo, Jerry Barton, former president of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated, was here for the inauguration of this monument. And in the same day, my office, the Office of Tourism and Culture of the municipality of Campomarino, unveiled a mural dedicated to Benjamin O. Davis. Benjamin O. Davis was the commander of the 332nd Fighter Group in Ramitelli, and he was the first African American general in the United States aviation. His father, Benjamin O. Davis Benjamin O. Davis Sr., became the first general in the US Army. So these two men, Benjamin O. Davis Sr. and Benjamin O. Davis Jr., paved the way for the integration of the United States Army. And the aviation was the first institution to integrate in the United States when President Harry Truman signed the Executive Order 9981, ending segregation in the armed forces. So these pilots paved the way for the integration in American military and in American society. Another great event that we hosted in April in the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the end of the war was organized by my office and also by the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. We had 6 days of events from April 22nd to April 28th, and I have here some videos of that. I hope I can show you them. We have videos of that event. So the first video that I want you to show is a video of April 23, when we had the military day. So we hosted veterans from Italy, some veterans that survived the bombing of Foggia, and we hosted also Daniel Kill, a veteran, a DOTA, a documented original Tuskegee Airman. He is now 102 years old, and he came back in Italy for this event, for this occasion. So I want you to show a little video of the ceremony. It's a video from Italian television.
Sono trascorsi 80 anni dalla liberazione dal nazifascismo e Campomarino sta ripercorrendo la storia con una serie di eventi alla presenza dei sopravvissuti alla Seconda Guerra Mondiale provenienti da USA e Italia, uomini, combattenti, ma portatori di amore e pace, che hanno ricordato gli orrori di uno dei conflitti che ha provocato più morti nella storia. Nella giornata di mercoledì sono stati premiati le vedove e gli eroi di guerra caduti nei cieli campomarinesi nel 1944 e 1945, con l'obiettivo di inviare un messaggio di libertà che oggi, più che mai, è tinteggiato dalle ombre di nuovi conflitti e dalla perdita di vite umane.
Oggi abbiamo inaugurato un murales dedicato a Nazareno Biagiola, un pilota di recanati caduto qui a Campomarino nel 1944, ed una targa dedicata ad altri piloti, tra cui il pilota foggiano Vito Petruzzelli, anch'egli caduto nei cieli di Campomarino nel 1945. Abbiamo ospitato in questi giorni il pilota Daniel Kill, un Tuskegee Airmen di 102 anni, che è tornato qui a Campomarino dopo un viaggio lunghissimo. Questo testimonia quanto sia importante per questi piloti americani la storia che custodisce il Molise e che custodisce il nostro paese. È una storia che ha visto protagonista Campomarino durante la Seconda Guerra Mondiale con 5 aeroporti. In uno di questi aeroporti erano per l'appunto ospitati i famosi Tuskegee Airmen, vale a dire i piloti di colore che hanno combattuto 2 guerre, una contro il nazismo e il fascismo ed una guerra contro la segregazione e la discriminazione razziale. E proprio da qui, da Campomarino, è partito poi il loro riscatto e la loro lotta per i diritti civili, tant'è vero che loro hanno aperto la strada al movimento per i diritti civili degli anni 60 guidato da Martin Luther King. Il significato profondo di questa manifestazione è appunto quello di ricordare quelli che sono i valori della pace, della fratellanza tra i popoli, valori che devono guidarci soprattutto adesso, in un contesto molto particolare nel quale il mondo e l'Europa si trovano in situazioni difficili, anche in contesti di guerra, che comunque bisognerebbe sempre evitare. A quanto pare 80 anni dopo non abbiamo ancora imparato la lezione. So this was a video from the 23 of April, and on the 24 we organized the conference with the support of the Freedom for Italy network. We had 15 speakers, and among that speakers there were also the surviving spouses, so the widows of the pilots that were employed in Campomarino during World War II, and also the US Consul General from Naples. So I have another little video for the conference.
Un messaggio di pace, libertà e giustizia è partito da Campomarino durante gli eventi con protagonisti gli eroi di guerra e le loro spose per l'anniversario della liberazione e del V-Day. Una giornata importante che ha visto il ritorno, a distanza di 80 anni, di Daniel Kill, il pilota di 102 anni che ha combattuto in Molise per la liberazione dell'Italia dal nazifascismo. Erano anni ben diversi quelli della guerra, che Kill ricorda in maniera cristallina, soprattutto per via di quel razzismo che permeava gli animi in quel periodo, in cui i Tuskegee Airmen, ovvero il reparto di piloti di caccia degli USA destinato agli uomini afroamericani, solcavano i cieli e con coraggio e resilienza liberavano i popoli dall'oppressione. Tutt'oggi il legame tra USA e Italia è ancora forte, come ha sottolineato la console americana Tracy Roberts Pounds, che ha puntato l'attenzione sui valori condivisi e sul contributo che gli uomini e le donne hanno dato al mondo, nella speranza che i conflitti bellici restino solo un lontano ricordo.
Ma io sono d'accordo, grazie innanzitutto alla comunità, al sindaco di Campomarino per aver fatto questo evento meraviglioso. Oggi è un'opportunità per tutti noi ricordare il contributo di un gruppo di uomini e di donne senza paragone negli Stati Uniti. I Tuskegee Airmen hanno fatto una cosa per la storia che ancora approfittiamo. Quello che hanno fatto per aiutare la liberazione d'Italia vive ancora, ne hanno circondato per questa vittoria, ma anche quello che hanno fatto per il mio paese, per aiutare il militare, le forze armate, essere totalmente grate. È stato un passo molto per il futuro, che è una cosa che oggi noi approfittiamo. Io aggiungerei che la storia è fatta per uomini e donne quotidiane e noi quando guardiamo indietro vediamo il contributo che è stata una cosa che loro non hanno mai pensato. E noi che siamo qua oggi ricordando questo insieme, Italia e Stati Uniti, dove il rapporto fra di noi è più forte che mai. È una cosa che, perché noi siamo paesi uniti per la democrazia, uniti per il nostro amore per la libertà. Vediamo come noi possiamo ancora essere insieme per celebrare la nostra storia, per guardare a un futuro più meraviglioso, più eccellente.
And on April 25th, we had the Liberation Day. It's an important day in Italy because it's a national holiday. In this holiday, in this day, we try to share the ideals, the values of democracy, of freedom, and also the sacrifice of the Allies soldiers and also of Italian soldiers. So on that day, we organized a commemoration at the monument of the fallen during World War I and World War II, and also a tour of the airfield. And it was very touching because Daniel Keel, a pilot at Tuskegee Airmen, was there after 80 years, and also the surviving spouses, so the widows of the pilots were there, where their husbands were employed during the war. They met local people, they met the old men in Campomarino that still remember about their husbands. So it was a very, very touching day that I want to show you. Also, this video is in Italian, but the scenes that you will see are very, very touching.
Il nostro viaggio in Molise oggi si ferma a Campomarino in occasione della festa della liberazione, 80 anni dal 25 aprile 1945. Per l'occasione il Centro Servizio Turistici Culturali di Campomarino insieme al Comune ha organizzato un evento straordinario. Qui presente ospiti una delegazione dei Tuskegee Airmen che all'epoca stazionarono qui a Campomarino in contrada Ramitelli, ospite d'eccezione il pilota Daniel Skill di 102 anni. Rimanete con noi. È stato un lungo viaggio arrivare fino a qui, tante emozioni oggi.
Mi piace molto volare, mi piace molto viaggiare, mi piace molto navigare. Ero un pilota, lo sono ancora nel cuore ed è una passione che non mancherà mai.
Lei faceva parte del compartimento appunto che era qui di stanza a Campomarino. Cosa ricorda di quel periodo?
Sono qui per rappresentare, ho rappresentato anche in passato tutti i Tuskegee piloti e sono orgoglioso di farlo, di averlo fatto e di continuarlo a fare.
Lei che ha vissuto la guerra, qual è il messaggio che si vuole mandare ai giovani?
Il mio messaggio per i giovani è quello di prendersi una buona educazione accademica e di vita. La nostra
Tiana is giving her friends a tour, so she's our partner here.
opportunità di imparare e di avere una vita.
Marco Altobello, il Centro Servizi Turistici e Culturali, insieme all'amministrazione, ha deciso nell'80° anno della liberazione di far venire qui appunto una delegazione, un momento anche importante per ricordare un pezzo di storia mondiale, ma che riguarda tutto questo territorio e che negli anni è stata anche dimenticata, e grazie anche a te e al lavoro che hai fatto l'ha riportata alla luce.
In realtà questa storia è una storia di respiro internazionale, perché Campomarino durante la Seconda Guerra Mondiale ha ospitato ben 5 aeroporti, nei quali era impiegata la Balkan Air Force, la Desert Air Force, quindi reparti inglesi, britannici, ma anche reparti multinazionali con piloti di diverse nazionalità. In particolare noi oggi abbiamo ospitato la delegazione dei Tuskegee Airmen, che sono i primi piloti di colore della storia degli Stati Uniti, e sono dei piloti che hanno combattuto 2 guerre, contro il fascismo e il nazismo e contro la segregazione razziale. Da qui, da Campomarino, è partita la loro riscossa contro la segregazione razziale per il movimento per i diritti civili. E nell'80° anniversario abbiamo inteso ospitare questa ampia delegazione. Ieri c'era anche la console generale degli Stati Uniti, Tracy Roberts Pounds, delle delegazioni delle ambasciate tedesche, britanniche, ed è stato un momento molto toccante, soprattutto perché abbiamo ospitato Daniel Kill, che è un pilota di Tuskegee di 102 anni, che da qui, da Campomarino, ha deciso di rendere omaggio a tutta la nostra comunità, che è una comunità che è profondamente legata a questa storia, che negli ultimi anni sta cercando di valorizzare ancora di più questa eredità.
I piloti combattevano 2 battaglie, quella contro il nazismo e quella contro il razzismo. Cosa è cambiato negli anni?
Sì, sono molto contenti che hanno combattuto e vinto la battaglia contro il fascismo, contro il nazismo e anche contro il razzismo che c'era in quel periodo.
Qual è il significato di essere oggi qui, a 80 anni dalla liberazione?
È un onore essere qui, come rappresentare tutti i piloti di quel periodo dei Tuskegee e anche di accompagnare Daniel Kiel, che è qui un pilota di quel periodo, e vogliono ringraziare anche tutti i cittadini che l'hanno accolto in quel periodo durante la guerra qui a Campomarino.
Okay, and this was the event of the 25th of April. And in this video, there are also some scenes of the museum, because in 2024 we founded the MATA Museum, the Museum of Aviation and Tuskegee Airmen, that is the only museum in Italy, and I think in Europe, dedicated to the African Americans and to the Tuskegee Airmen. So this is a starting point, because with this museum we are trying to educate the young generations, to inspire the next generations, and also to preserve the values of freedom, democracy, and equality. But not only that, because I had also the privilege to speak at the Tuskegee Airmen Convention in Washington, D.C. on August 2024. This was my first convention, and for the first time I met the pilots, the son, daughters, and the surviving spouses. So from that moment we started to work in creating also an Italian chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated. And last month, in August, I participated also at the 2025 National Convention in New Orleans. The convention was hosted by the Higgins Hotel and by the World War II Museum in New Orleans. It was a great occasion, because there I met not only some pilots, but also their families, and I had in these years the chance to meet some of these Tuskegee Airmen, of these Tuskegee pilots, some legends. I met George Hardy in Florida at the conference at the Polk State College on January 2024. I met Daniel Kiel, as you see, in Italy last April, and also in New Orleans in August. I met also Harry Stewart. Harry Stewart was very famous in the United States. He died last year. He was 101 years old, and I met him when we shoot the documentary Return to Ramitelli in Italy. So I had the chance to live the example of this pilot, because their example has shaped the way I see the world. Because I learned that courage, it's not just about moments of heroism, but it's in everyday choices, choices to stand for justice, for equality, for freedom, and for democracy. So the lives of these pilots is very important. It's something that I live every single day, because I had the chance to meet them. And these pilots did something more than fight a war, because they changed America. And by knowing them, by hearing their stories, I've been inspired to carry forward their legacy in my own life. Now I feel the power of these people, and in my life I will always share their legacy, because this is not just an American story, it's an Italian history, it's a world history, a universal history, because it's the history of democracy, of freedom, of equality, and it's something we have to preserve for the future generations. The last two things I want you to show is it's something about my book. I wrote a book 2 years ago, Red Tales from Tuskegee to Ramitelli, and this is the first book in Italian about this story, and tells the story of the Tuskegee Airmen from the Italian point of view. And I had the chance to present this book in several Italian cities, Campomarino, Campobasso, also in Rome at the Senate of the Italian Republic. In Florence, I was invited by the local Black community to present this book in February. February is the Black History Month in the United States. I presented the book also in Venice, in Naples, at the American Consulate, in Foggia, and last August in Philadelphia at the Museum of Italian Culture, and also during the last convention in New Orleans at the American Italian Cultural Center. So this book is in Italian, so it's important to share this story also in Italy, because this story is almost unknown in Italy. And as I said, my goal is to preserve and share this story and this legacy. And the last things that I want you to show is the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated Italy chapter. The Italian chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen Incorporated was born last year and was presented officially in April in Italy, last April during the events in Italy, and also in August in New Orleans during the convention. So the chapter focus on preserving also the sites where the Tuskegee Airmen served in Italy. As you know, the building, we have several buildings that we have to preserve, to restore, I hope. So our goal is to restore those buildings, those airfields, but also to involve young generations and to preserve this history in teaching young generations our core values of freedom, democracy, and equality. Here you can see some email links if you want some information, so if you want to know something about the Italian chapter, if you want to become a member of the Italian chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen, you can write at the email Italy Thai chapter or Marco Altobello, so you can be part of this great story and of this great legacy. Thank you.
Bravissimo.
Thank you, Marco.
Robert, you are muted.
I muted everybody to prevent any interference, but if you have any questions for Marco, it's a beautiful story told well, and please ask him, feel free to do it, about anything you want. You've already seen his contact information, and he's sort of one of our, he's our flagship story for Freedom for Italy Network, and every month we'll present another story, but Marco's the first, and it's an excellent one. So do we have any questions? You just need to unmute yourself first.
Good afternoon. This is First Vice President Holmes. How's everybody doing?
Okay.
Doing good. It's not a question. It is a praise. I have to give Marco and Melanie tremendous praise for coming to the New Orleans convention. This was my first convention as First Vice. People are still talking about what we're doing and what direction we're going. So I want to thank both of them, number one. And number two, every time Marco talks about history, I'm like, wait a minute, that wasn't on my page. I'm a history buff. My family's from Alabama, so I'm well immersed in that. And every time you come up with something, I have to go look for something else. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And from your efforts, Marco, I want to say you and Melanie opened the eyes of a former sergeant, Jaime Munez. He came home and recruited 10 more former military people to get into the organization. And that's what we need, that 30, 40-year-old energy. So I want to say thank you for coming. And get your boots ready, because I'm already planning 2026. So you and Melanie start putting your lunch money together, because We're going to the Air Force Academy in Denver, Colorado. So I just want to say thank you. And Marco, you and I need to talk, because while I was over there, you were talking about restoration. I may have found some sources of money right there in Italy to help you get started. That's all I have.
Can I jump in? Can I jump in now?
Yeah,
Seems
go ahead,
to be the
Melanie.
perfect segment. Okay, so actually on Sunday, September, let me check, make sure the date is correct. Sunday, September 28th, I had a conference call this morning, and the one of the commissioners for the Commission for the Preservation of Americans' History Abroad is willing to come on and do a talk on not only the role the commission can take in helping us with something like a restoration project, money fundraising, but also just in general how they can help us to achieve some of the anything that actually involves preserving America's heritage abroad. So it has to be, abroad, but it has to be something tangible. But in any case, she's willing to come on September 28th, talk about that, talk a little bit about Operation Benjamin, because she's involved with that as well, and talk a little bit about, in general, about the role of the not so spoken about Jewish soldier during World War II. So I think that she'll bring an interesting twist to the table as well. So Robert, if that's okay, I'm going to pass on her contact information, but I can go ahead. I saw that Marco did a really nice little write-up on the LinkedIn or your Facebook, I'm not sure. But wherever we can put her in, I'll give you all the information. Her name is Nancy Berman, and I'll send you everything, Robert, and Marco, so that we can make sure she gets on that schedule. I think you'll really enjoy listening to her. But more than anything, I think she is I was kind of shy before about talking a little more in detail about what she can do for us, what this commission can do for us. But I think that it could, once we get a project on the ground, they can be very instrumental in helping us get funded. And something Brad Craver mentioned, he's on the call today, something that where people can actually, write it off as a tax deduction, because, sometimes Americans, I know that, I'm pretty sure that doesn't exist in Italy, Marco. But in America, a lot of people are big into donations because it's a tax deduction. And when I've asked around in Italy, people look at me like I'm from another planet. But when we do our taxes at the end of the year, you can write these off your taxes. So that's an important thing. Now, it might be something we can explore if it's done in Italy or not. But I think that's Marco. I loved your talk. And I think that, and I want to thank Angela too, because Angela, Marco and I wouldn't have been there had you all not worked so hard to help us get there. So I want to thank everybody who helped us to get to that conference in New Orleans. And we just need to work out a better strategy much earlier to get to next year's conference in Denver. That's all I have.
Melanie. So yes, if you send the write-up that you read, inviting you to this session that Marco did, to her, and she can put something together about her September, you said the 27th, whatever.
Sunday the 28th, yeah. She wanted to know if she could have slides, and I said yes. And she's very used to working with the Zoom platform, so she's no stranger to meetings. And she is the commissioner that's been working with me on the projects in Nettuno on connecting baseball to the Italian soldier and to Italy in general. So she's a very good speaker. So I will pass everything on to her, Marco. But Marco, you and I can talk first, and then I'll make sure that everything is squared away, and so that Robert, you can have it, and Marco can have it. Okay. But I think you'll enjoy hearing Nancy. She's very, very energetic, so I think you'll enjoy listening to her. Hey, Brad.
Yeah, just invite her to write something that explains what she'll talk about, and I'll put it out to the 118 people that are invited to this Zoom call around the world.
Okay.
So I promise to do that. And the sooner the better, so that people can plan for it.
I'll get on that, because she gave it to me today orally. I'll just put it together, run it by her, make sure it sounds good. and then I'll send it forward to probably in the next 2 days. Okay?
That's very good. So does anybody else have any questions for Marco or anybody else? No?
I put a question in the chat, Robert.
All right. Do you want to, I don't know that everybody can see it, but if you want to go ahead and ask it, Eddie, that would help.
Yeah, Sullivan, London here. Marco's superb presentation. I've been working with Marco for almost 2 years now, and it's a revelation. I've been to Ramatelli. I've been to Campomarino, charming town. I've been to the airfield. The story is extraordinary, exceptional, and Marco's done a brilliant job telling it. And I think the fact that he's telling it from an Italian perspective is really extraordinary, because the legacy in the area of Campomarino is very strong. And the museum that Marco's opening in Campomarino is unique. I believe it's the only museum dedicated to African American servicemen outside the United States in the world. I think it's the world's first museum dedicated to the memory of African American servicemen. A couple of questions I put in the post. I mean, have you, apart from the Tuskegee convention next August, I assume, in Colorado, apart from that, got any other plans for 2026 you can share with us, or what you would like to do in 2026? Because you've started something which I think you're doing your job in Italy marvelously, because you're spreading the story across the country. But I just wonder if you're going to be doing anything else. And the other question is there any interest in this group in broadening the African American story in the Italian campaign? We're talking about the Second World War in Italy, 1943 to 1945, because the 92nd Division, the Buffalo Soldiers, were also in Italy. And they played a very significant role in the final campaign in April 1945. I wonder if there's any interest in Italy or elsewhere in is broadening the story to have the Tuskegee Airmen story as part of a broad African American serviceman story in Italy. Of course, you can add into that the 100th Battalion, which was a segregated Japanese American formation. So the Japanese Americans, these mainly born in Hawaii, they were drafted, obviously, but they were also put into a segregated formation. The 100th Battalion, which served in the casino battles,
right,
all the way up the Ligurian coast, right up to Genoa. And so there's another untold story there, which I think is very inclusive, reaches out to groups of people who otherwise might find the story of the Second World War to be one really confined for, older white blokes, men like us. Anyway, those are my questions.
I wanted to suggest too, since you're talking about the Nisei, the Japanese American soldiers, mainly from Hawaii and California, there's a good book online that you could download. It's free, called the Akimoto Brothers, Akimoto, the Akimoto Brothers. It's a short read, but it's a good story of two soldiers that are buried side by side at the first cemetery I worked in, the largest World War II cemetery, Lorraine American Cemetery. And it's just their story. It's a beautiful story. It's a sad story, of course. We all know how World War II, many soldiers, their end. But it's a beautiful story that you can read. And I agree. One of the things that I discussed at this conference was just that, the fact that we know a lot of the stories are very similar, and they're I just go ahead and probably politically incorrect saying they're primarily about white soldiers. And so white Anglo-Saxon Protestant soldiers primarily. So somebody mentioned just after the conference to me in a Facebook post that, why do we stress so much? It's about the Black soldier. We're talking about the Tuskegee Airmen. Well, because that's what we're talking about, the fact that that we always talk about everyone else, but we don't talk about a lot about the diversity. And if we do, it's sort of like second to everything else. The Nisei soldiers, the Native American population, the Hispanic soldiers, and right now there's a book coming. There's a book that's out. As a matter of fact, I have it here in my counter, called Patriots from the Barrio, and soon there's going to be a miniseries on that. On I don't know whether it's going to be Netflix, HBO, etc. But the author actually got the rights purchased from him to the rights to purchase, to make the film, the production for the Patriots from the Barrio. His name is Dave Gutierrez, and he has his own YouTube channel now on specifically on the Hispanic soldiers, and in his case, the Mexican American unit that was a single unit that served during World War II. And I'll see if somehow I can get him to come and speak to us some Sunday, because he's a wonderful, wonderful speaker, Dave Gutierrez, Patriots from the Barrio. But these stories are stories that perhaps, I mean, there are many stories out there, but they're not in the forefront. And I think that the work that Marco has started, and now when you add in the 92nd, I mean, there are lots of different units that served and that were segregated units and isolated units that we don't hear enough about. And it's not because they were not as important. It was just because of the conditions of the times, we're now sort of catching up to those stories, so to speak. So thank you for pointing that out, Eddie, and thank you again, Marco, for all the work you've done.
So Melanie, a key element of this that we've talked about in the past is how one maintains the momentum and the emotive force of stories when it's not been 80 years or any number of years that ends in a zero since this all happened. And the most important way in which you sustain that, besides putting it into films, is also having much more to the story than just the battles in World War II, but the emotion and the importance to people, certainly our democratic heritage, which is part of Freedom for Italy's initiative, so that there's much more to the story that carries people forward emotionally, not just because of the history. So thanks, Melanie. Any other questions?
It's a good, Robert, it's really all about combining both, not just, it's not just about World War II, but it is just about World War II in terms of that sacrifice leads us to where we are today. You know, we don't know how the world would be so different if all of that didn't take place. But all of that took place by lots of people. It wasn't a specific group or a specific anything. Everybody had a chance to be a hero. It was an equal opportunity war for becoming a hero, but not everybody was recognized as such. So yeah, that's what we're here for.
Just to chime in, just a quick second. Jay Wentz has a real connection here in the U.S. in Southern Florida of the 92nd, and he does a call every month too, connecting all of those guys that are participating, women that participated in the war effort, the nurses that haven't been acknowledged. There's a big push, and Jay Wentz does a call each month, and he has a kind of national call that we all participate in that you may want to actually come in, and it's WENTZ, and he's in Southern California. Florida, Southern Florida, and he did the conference that Marco first spoke at. And he has a call that actually integrates all of those organizations that are kind of telling that story and also participating with schools and everything to advance the knowledge. Just so that you guys, there is something here in the year.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Raymond. So yeah, and Tony, I will get you the full recording of this session for you to edit. And yeah, Jay Wirtz, I think you're talking about, Wayman has been with us for some time, but he does do something once a month that's very good. And yes, Eddie, certainly we can make the video particularly once Tony gets it on our on the Facebook page for Freedom for Italy, then you can point people there, among other things.
Robert,
Well, yeah.
I have one more comment. So our production team that we introduced to the convention this year is going around the country trying our best to get the actual stories on video of the remaining Dodas. And we're working very quickly because we know we have very little time. That's number one. Number two, some of the research that I've been doing has focused, I think, I'm not sure who on the call said it, but there was a Harlem Hellraiser in World War I, whose son then became a Tuskegee Airman. And so that's the angle of the stories that we're telling. We're not just focused on Tuskegee Airmen. We want to show how we got here, what caused the airmen to know that they needed to stand up. So in the convention for 2026, the theme is the Tuskegee experience. How did we get here? What did they do after they left? And that wasn't just about the airmen. I found out a month ago, my father was hanging out with Benjamin O. Davis. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're just telling me this now? So we've got a lot of history that we're busy recording so that we can have that intellectual property to be shared over there in Europe, here in the States. When I first got into this organization, we did a humongous event at the Italian embassy here in Washington, D.C. There were over 75 original airmen in that room. Blew my mind. Couldn't get around the room fast enough. And I still have the pictures, but we want to document that. I saw where somebody wants the opportunity for this conversation and presentation to go into England. I would love that. As First Vice, my job has become making sure everybody understands the importance of what happened. It's not just about color. Had we not changed the trajectory of the fight, we might be under a whole different government in a lot of places, if you think about it.
Yeah, Angela, let me ask you, you use this term, which many people on the call won't recognize, and that is, what does DOTA stand for?
Oh, Documented Original Tuskegee Airmen.
Okay.
And what I'm finding, probably about a month before I went to Italy, there was a gentleman that was 103 who said he was a Buffalo Soldier and a Tuskegee Airman. But in this organization, you need to verify who they are and what, where they were. Dota Keel is a good example. Triple rated, ready to go, but the war ended before he could leave. I spent time with him in Italy, and I asked him if he was glad he came. He was ecstatic to see where where the other soldiers flew from, and he was ready, but didn't get the opportunity. So we've got a lot of those men and women that were in that space. They were in the experience, but didn't actually get to fight in the war. And so we want to continue to tell that story as well, because they were here fighting the double situation, racism over here and admiration over there. The go away bag that everyone got at the gala had a challenge coin that represented Tuskegee Airmen, but it had, and I know Marco's going to laugh at this, it had a Hershey's chocolate bar in it. Most people that know anything about the military during that time, that chocolate Hershey bar was like giving away gold. And so that's what we want. We want to tell that story. We want you to feel what it's like. I'm still talking about being in a dirt field, looking at an abandoned building, but I'm overwhelmed by that building. You know what I mean? And so we've got to get these young people immersed in the culture, immersed in the history. You don't know where you're going if you don't know where you came from.
The hope that you have that you can get past what you may have experienced as prejudice in your own life and how people 80 years ago went well beyond that. So, but let me ask if anybody else has any questions before we end this, and I get the copy to you, Tony. Anybody
Robert,
else? Well, go ahead.
Melanie was talking about diversity, minorities. I think there is another great story we can share in this Freedom for Italy project. The Navajo code talkers, the U.S. Marines who used the unwritten Navajo language to transmit messages during World War II in the Pacific Theater, I think. That's another great story about diversity, about minorities during World War II.
And Marco, I got to tell you something about that. See, that's a good example right there. So during World War II, if you look into it more, we often talk about the Navajo code talkers, right? But you know, the Navajo talkers were just a little teeny weeny part of the Native Americans that served in World War II. The Native American population was the Native Americans in general were the highest number of should I say, we would call them minority, but they're not minority. They should be the majority. Anyway, the highest ethnic group that actually enrolled voluntarily into the military. If I remember correctly, and I have to check my own sources myself, but it was something like 75% of the eligible Native Americans volunteered to join the military. So it was a very high percentage. Yet, the concentration, thanks to Hollywood and books, primarily thanks to Hollywood, has been about the Navajo code talkers. But I met a professor who did his sabbatical here for 1 year in Italy. I should say there because I'm right in the US. And he is from Oklahoma, and he did his whole doctoral thesis on the participation of the Native Americans in World War II, and specifically during the Italian campaign. So he was, he wanted to show, or actually, I haven't seen his final works, but what he was out to do was gather information as to where they fought and to tell their story much in a better way, should I say, in a way that everybody then could see the role that they had during World War II. Also, the Navajo code talkers, but that's a good example right there. Just like other groups, like we talk about the Tuskegee Airmen, but then we have the 92nd. Then we have that other group that I read a lot. The hell, what was it? Highway to Hell or
Harlem Hellraisers.
There, Harlem Hellraisers. We don't There's not a lot of this. The 761 Tank Battalion. There's all types of units that were specifically Black segregated units. I mean, we're talking about Tuskegee Airmen because they were in Italy in the Italian campaign, but there are a lot of units. We just started to learn about the 6888 thanks to Hollywood with that movie. But more and more, as people start to realize that everybody served, it's not to just highlight, well, they served and they were Black and we should talk about that. No, it's because so far it hasn't been done, and it's time to do that as well. It's time to talk about them as well. It's not because we're only specifically saying it because they're of a particular racial group or race or ethnicity or whatever. It's because it's time that now we bring that to the forefront as well. So good point, Marco.
Thanks, everybody. I will end the call. I think we heard from anybody that wanted to add to this, and we'll get it to Tony to put on our Facebook page. And next Sunday, we'll have our regular meeting, but as soon as, Melanie, you get me the write-up from the person you'd like me to have speak on the 27th, I will do that. And there are others, Brad and others, who can give a similar talk. So, Marco, thank you very much again. And we really appreciate what you've done and put together. And as our first focused talk, we will do others and record them. And hopefully, because we'll be out on other media like Facebook, we'll begin to get a greater following. So thanks, everybody. Bye. Ciao.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye. Thanks, Marco.
Bye-bye.
Bye.